rough material, starting with the first scene. It showed contradiction, conflict, critical moment, motive, and character of the hero, as well as contrast. I didn't forget about my worldview, humor, touching moments, and aspirations. Next came the basics, legends, mythical creatures, and the like. There are firearms and living cars and monsters here. Chinese mythology, myths of the northern peoples of Europe, Greek mythology, ancient Roman legends, and others were united. But still, the plot needs to be developed slowly, the details revealed in the middle or even closer to the end. Batten made the carefree and confident optimist Albert the main character. The story takes off when he meets a dog based on Shan Kai-jun from Shanhai Jing, but then he realized that Shan Kai-jun was too difficult to pronounce, so he named him Yufa. The essence of the manga is about a boy and his goofy but cute pet animal. And the story will begin with a description of the life of the inhabitants of a small town. The first volume will tell about how the main character got a dog. In Batten's fan group, they discussed the student's action when he donated $1 million to himself. They agreed that a worthy work had finally appeared and decided to donate too. The office began receiving notifications about different amounts of donations for manga. Someone suggested that it was transmitted contagiously from Batten to the fans. The guy with green hair thought that most likely this news had flown to the top of social networks. The editor opened the page, and it actually turned out to be true. The workers assumed that this was just a lucky coincidence after an eccentric act. He wanted to call the streamer, but he didn't pick up. He's probably drawing at home right now. In this case, the script is a very important and highest priority thing. To write it, you need to think about every detail, and by the time you get to the next scenes, consider half the job done. After 7.5 hours of work, the entire floor of his room was strewn with scraps of paper. After an hour and a half, the guy has almost written everything he needs, but first he will eat, buy papers, and start writing a new chapter. In the dead of night, the script was ready, and the student decided to begin the first draft. He drew the main orphan character, whose name was Albert. He grew up in the village. All the villagers were very friendly and nice to him, especially when he was stealing food. But suddenly something strange happened. An old man was bitten by an unknown creature, which is why he died. People were afraid that something bad was happening in their mountains. They had recently heard strange sounds in the evening. Batten drew this chapter with great speed. In a couple of hours, it was almost ready. The main character furiously attacked the cattle, which killed many people. Suddenly, something knocked the weapon out of his hands, and the guy asked who it was. An old man with a long beard and mustache held a dog and said that Albert was mistaken, because this is just a beast from the mountain, and not a killer of the villagers, since this killer has long gone to the east. The sage said that this guy was predestined to be chosen, connected with him by fate itself, so he left him this mountain warrior dog. The old man also ordered him to go east, where they would meet again when Albert found the real killer. The guy only grabbed the dog tighter and begged him not to leave, and Batten finished drawing the animal's paw. At 18 minutes past 2 in the morning, the streamer finally finished drawing the first chapter. In the second chapter, the story will be about a mountain dog warrior with great difficulty. It turns out that he attacked people against his own will. By 7 o'clock in the morning, the main character had finished drawing the first 3 chapters of the manga. The first chapter consists of 38 pages. The second consists of 25, which can be considered a normal length. The meeting with the people from Jie Ying Publishing House will be at noon. The student still has time to check everything a couple more times. At the appointed time, he called a taxi and said that he needed to go to Akihabara, to the Jie Ying Publishing House. A few minutes later, the guy was at the publishing house, where he said that he had previously arranged a meeting with Mr. Aikiro. Walking further around the room, Batten is surprised by the works hanging on the wall, and Ben tells the guy that he has about an hour for the meeting. Also, he should not ask the gentleman about the plot of Straw Hat, and he should not talk about topics not related to the manhwa. During this dialogue, the student kept looking at the walls where different figures stood. Soon they reached Mr. Aikiro's office, where a meeting was scheduled. As soon as the main character appeared in the doorway, the gentleman stood up to greet the guy. Batten greeted him and said that he had heard a lot about Aikiro, and it was a great honor for him to continue his work. Half an hour later, the blonde became embarrassed and looked at his watch, because the guest had been pestering the gentleman for a long time. In his opinion, this was very impolite, so the man decided to go remind him about it. He entered the office and reminded that the student still needed to drop by the Jie Publishing House. The gentleman in turn asked the guy if he was in a hurry and warned that if Ben was busy, he would send his assistant to see Batten off instead. The blonde was surprised by this situation, but quickly pulled himself together and left the office, apologizing for the disturbance and saying that he was in no hurry. Mr. Aichiro reminded the guy about the manhwa and offered to show the drafts. The streamer happily handed him a pile of papers, expecting the gentleman's criticism. Aichiro carefully looked through the samples of what he had written and returned them to the guy without saying anything. Batten was confused by the gentleman's reaction and only asked how bad it was. The man reassured him with a smile, assuring him that the younger generation was indeed not a mistake. He also said that the guy has a very outstanding drawing. Moreover, the story is easy and effective, although there are some small flaws, but these are all minor things. Batten was very surprised and delighted at such praiseworthy words from the gentleman, making sure that he was serious when he said this. Aikiro verified the student's intention to go to Jieyin Publishing House and submit the manuscript for review, and assured him that this was the right decision. A minute later, Mr. Aikiro handed the guy a letter of recommendation on his own behalf, which would help the guy in the publishing house, which made Batten's face glow with happiness and anticipation. Already on the way to the Jieyin Publishing House, there was a dialogue between Batten and Ben, in which the blonde was increasingly doubtfully surprised at how the gentleman devoted so much time to him, more than an hour to be exact. Moreover, Batten is a mangaka, and the gentleman wrote him a letter of recommendation. The guy didn't pay attention to Ben's dubious tone. He just smiled and politely replied that it was all thanks to his connections. The blonde interrupted the guy's joy and replied that he had no merit in this. He needed to thank his sister, and also added that Batten was much cooler than he thought. Ben's words gave the guy even more self-confidence, and his eyes spoke about it. He spent the rest of the trip thinking that this time he would definitely succeed. Already at the Jieyin Publishing House, the publication's editor, Bill, carefully reviewed the guy's drafts, relying on his sharp mind and complete dedication to his work. Batten sat impatiently, only tenaciously looking at the editor and observing his reaction. But inside he was burning with anticipation and was tormented that something might go wrong and his efforts would be in vain. Finally, the man looked up at the guy and said that there were a few errors in the drafts, but overall, they were not bad. There was a possibility that they would be published. And now, the editor said in a decisive tone, they need to resolve other issues. Looking warily at the man, Batten said that he was listening to him, but inside he was cold from what was coming. Having decisively outlined the condition, Bill stated that the fact that the guy was a foreigner was not a problem. Their editors had already collaborated with several manga artists from America, but the guy would have to move to Japan. He will live in a dormitory if necessary. They will organize entrance exams for him to the university. This way it will be much more convenient to negotiate about the comic. Secondly, they enter into individual contracts, so the guy's comics, which are published in his homeland, need to be suspended or completely stopped. Thirdly, their publication contains a lot of mangaka, and the man also repeated that the guy's comic is very good, but it won't be possible to publish it immediately. As for the rest, since Mr. Aihiro recommended the guy, and his comic is really written at a high level, they will sign a contract with him, which they consider the best. Taken aback by such abundant information, the guy reflected that although there is serious competition between manga artists in Japan, such conditions are not suitable for him due to the quality of his comics. Also silently, he looked at Mr. Bill and recalled his genuine arrogance in his eyes from the very beginning of their meeting. Not losing heart from such a meager attitude towards himself, the guy gathered his strength in front of what was coming, and assured himself that he would not give in to it just like that. Slowly, and believing in himself, Batten began to explain that they live in the age of technology. There is no need to move to Japan. And secondly, as far as he knows, their publishing house also practices a cooperation agreement. Without bending under the student's convictions, the editor said questioningly that since Batten knew about this agreement, then he knew about its terms. Without waiting for an answer, the man continued what he had said and stated that under such an agreement, it is simply necessary that the mangaka be known in professional circles, and the guy is just a beginner. Batten did not give up under such pressure from the editor, and continued that he was confident in his comic, even believing that it would become a classic work in the future. And if he ends the contract with their publishing house, then all copyrights of the comic will be transferred directly to the publishing house, which does not suit the guy. The man repeated to the student, as he probably repeated more than once to people like him throughout his entire career, that they only enter into exclusive contracts with newcomers, and everything else is then discussed if desired. Extending his hand to conclude an agreement, the man began with promises that if he agreed, he would recommend him to Weekly Jump. The main character was thinking about the man's words, trying to make at least some decision because he liked the comic book. But about the contract, he didn't know what to think and do next. 2 minutes later, the guy got up and said that he was thinking everything over carefully and would make a decision. You just need to give him a little time, thanking the man for his time. Relieved, Bill stood up, reassuring the guy that everything was fine. He was giving him 2 days to make a decision, and handed him his business card so that he could contact him at any time. Leaving the office, Batten called Takashi-san and asked for a meeting at the publishing house, to which he agreed at any time convenient for the guy. After finishing the conversation, the student was thinking about his upcoming visit to the Jungtan Publishing House, and it would be good if he concluded a cooperation agreement with them. If it doesn't work out, then he'll wait until he becomes a famous manga artist and competes with Japanese manga artists in sales volume. Despite the fact that the guy likes Japanese manga, he hopes that domestically produced comics will finally be able to settle in Japan and destroy it. Already in the evening, Betten was at the Jangtan publishing house, where Mr. Takashi met him. The man offered the student tea and informed him that a little later they would visit the Siabi publishing house. The guy thanked him and said that he had actually come about the comic book, and really wanted to hear the gentleman's opinion on it. After running his eyes over the guy's sketches, the man was very surprised by this result from the student and asked if he really drew it. Without looking up from the pages of the comic, he continued to praise it, noting that the art and storyboarding were top class, and the story itself was very interesting. 30 minutes later, Mr. Takashi asked the guy where he would like to publish the comic, and if he would let him be the editor, the man would publish it in Teen Weekly. Baton was surprised by such a high assessment of his creation and thanked Takashi, but asked to listen to him to the end. The man was a little embarrassed by the guy's serious attitude, but said that he was ready to listen to him. The guy began his speech by admitting that he had previously visited the Jiayin publishing house with a letter of recommendation from Mr. Ichiro, where the conditions did not suit him. Now he wants to conclude a cooperation agreement with their publishing house on his own terms. As for the anime copyright, he also wants to work with their publisher, and maybe he's going too far, but he wants to clarify everything from the very beginning. The man was completely confused and did not expect the student to ask for an agreement. He stated that it would be very difficult, because with an individual contract he could provide the guy with the best conditions. But if not, then even with all his efforts he would not be able to give him a place in the weekly teen. Taken aback by what he heard, Batten realized that not everything was so simple. Apparently he was too daydreaming. However, he did not give up, and in hope asked what if it was a different magazine. With sadness, the man explained that he understood that if the guy had agreed to sign an individual agreement, he would have signed it at the Jiayin publishing house. And if this was another place of publication, then it would not be so difficult to conclude a cooperation agreement. Nevertheless, Takashi agreed and asked to wait for him in the office, going to discuss everything with management. 3 hours later, it was already dark and the tea was cold, and the guy still sat waiting, having lost hope for the best. Suddenly, Batten heard the quiet sound of the door opening, through which Mr. Takashi entered. The man met the guy's gaze with sadness, apologized, and said that he had done everything in his power. The main character reassured him that despite the management's response, he had achieved the man's recognition and was already grateful for it. With sadness, the man continued his speech, announcing the decision that if published in the Weekly Teenager with a cooperation agreement, they would only pay 60% of the fee. Baton interrupted the editor and joyfully exclaimed that despite all this, Weird Shanghai will still be able to publish, and the fact that the fee is low does not bother him at all. Already in the evening at the hotel, the guy called his girlfriend to tell him the good news about concluding a contract with the publishing house. She was very happy for him and replied that she always believed in him. But then she threateningly added why the seventh brother couldn't get through to the guy, which made him dumbfounded. After all, out of joy, the main character completely forgot about this meeting for his safety. Quickly recovering, he told Kathleen that he would definitely find him as soon as he had dinner. Already at night at the Japanese stadium, Batten was joyfully greeted by a dark-skinned athlete. He expressed his gratitude to the guy for his talent, to which Batten warmly replied that he was no worse than him. The athlete said that they were heading to Robin, who had a fight with Japanese star Shirai, and they should hurry. Standing in front of the ring, waiting for the start, the guy told Batten that this was an Asian MMA, which brought together America, Thailand, the Philippines, Japan, Mongolia, South Korea, and others. The guy also added that this fight is the final one for Shirai. The seventh brother and Shirai are longtime enemies who have already crossed paths 3 times in official competitions. 1 win, 1 loss, and 1 draw. And although this time it is not an official competition, both of them have more than enough passion. The ring announcer began his speech with the rules of the fight, where the competition consists of 3 rounds. Each fight lasts 5 minutes. Rest is a minute. Kicks and elbows are allowed. Victory is awarded in case of knockout. Judging stops in case of technical knockout. The host announced the start of the first round, and the fighters furiously rushed into battle. Shirai managed to avoid Robin's first attack, after which he used an uppercut, causing his opponent to easily escape. 5 minutes later, the first round was over, and Batten wondered why the seventh brother did not fully show his strength in this round. However, Shirai's powers are also on par, and he may also be skilled in his craft. The second round began, and Robin immediately applied an elbow lock, which Shirai did not expect. He tried to resist the same, and subsequently ended up knocked out. The second round was over, and Batten and his friend began to lose hope that their brother would win, because both fighters turned out to be quite strong, and both had equal chances of winning. The third round began, at which time the ring was already filled with the blood of the fighters in the end. Both were knocked out, and the competition was over. Everyone stood in complete shock because it turned out to be unclear who won and who lost, and the judge's decision would now depend on which fighter showed more skill. In a hot sweat, having spent all their strength, the athletes waited for the results of the battle to be summed up, when suddenly the presenter declared a draw. The whole stadium was shocked, and people began to loudly protest that the decision was unfair because Shirai was much cooler and Robin committed a violation. Batten could not stand it and asked the protester to answer for his words, to which he received the answer that he was a shameless American. The seventh appeared on the site with the words that his ancestor himself was an American, which made his anger increase even more, and he caused the crowd to attack the athlete. With fire in their eyes, some of the people rushed to attack him to beat him severely. Completely taken aback by such chaos, Batten did not notice the sharp blow to his back and exclaimed why he hit him. The guy told him that he was on Shirai's side, and it dawned on Batten that they were all part of the southern team. Suddenly the guy heard Tyler's voice, who shouted to him that his brother was surrounded and beaten by the crowd. He needed protection, because he had spent all his strength in the ring. At that same second, the main character lost all patience, and with fire in his eyes went to help Robin, because these terrible people dared to touch the seventh brother. He saw them mercilessly striking the athlete with terrible words, and furiously rushed at them. In a second, he flew with his whole body into the offender, pushing him away so hard that everyone was horrified. Afterwards, he shielded his brother, to which he quickly told him to quickly get out of this chaos, since it was not his responsibility at all. But the guy was not going to leave. In his thoughts, Batten understood that all these people were thinking only about themselves and decided to simply take advantage of the situation and ditch his brother. In a second, he noticed an incoming kick from his leg and fought back in time, fiercely defending Robin. Grabbing the offender by the neck, the student furiously slammed him to the floor, causing blood to fly out of his mouth. He looked at the crowd with an inhuman face and said clearly that he would also look at whoever dared to touch his seventh brother. The crowd rushed at the guy, and the guy looked at them carefully with the eyes of a monster, ready to tear everyone to pieces. At the same second, he dealt sharp blows to everyone, throwing them aside like insects. Suddenly, he received a blow from the left, but without feeling any pain. Batten demolished the offender with a return blow, the force of which slammed him into the wall. At that very second, they began to run around in fear. However, the streamer was not going to let them go so easily without punishment, and grabbing one of the offenders, threw him into the crowd like garbage. Surrounded by a monstrous aura, the guy did not notice at all how his dark-skinned friend was nearby, trying to reason with him. Through the darkness, Batten still heard the guy's words that one should not give in to the lust for murder, and it was better to stop in time before he began to rush at his own people. The guy immediately grabbed the boy who was behind Chernish by the collar and told his friend that he wanted to hit him. Then Tyler realized everything, quickly turned around and hit the enemy in the face. The opponents were so frightened that they denied the incident and made excuses. The main character looked at them mercilessly and told them to move away, that they were just going to deal with everyone. The spectators looked at the guy in bewilderment. They had no idea about his strength and considered him a monster. Finally, the police burst into the hall and began to restore order. Loaf and Tyler were shocked, causing them to freeze in amazement. Then the student and the seventh brother sat on the stairs, beaten and tired. The seventh brother laughed until the streamer hit him on the shoulder with his fist. After this, a notification appeared in front of the main character's face that he had completed a task where he had to hit 1,000 times. In the main office on the big screen, the game developers watched as the main character fought. The men speculated about who this fighter was and where he came from. They were amazed by his fighting abilities and wondered how